Today I'm just going to do a quick review of the Vibra Prime primer tube filler, and this is my experience with this product. I purchased this from Brownells or Midway. I don't remember exactly where I purchased it from. It takes 2 AA batteries. Just go on the bottom there. In the cartridge case, it comes with a large primer tube and a small primer tube. And this primer flip tray, you can see that there's, I don't know whether this will show up on camera, there's a little S right there, a little L right there to tell you which side the primers, to drop the primers out of. And the cover has no block here, and it has a little block in the corner on the other side. So if I was doing large primers, obviously I'd put the cover on to close up that side. To use it, you slide this in, make sure it's seated all the way. And again, this is large primers. These are labeled as well. Probably won't make it out on the camera, but that says small. This says large. So you put this in there, twist and turn. You pull the handle, angle it so that the primers feed down into the slot, and the idea being that they drop in. And I will record some video. This will be live and not edited, so we'll see how it does. But my experience so far has been that it works wonderfully with small primers, rifle or pistol, and horribly with large primers, to the extent that I don't bother to use it with large primers, because if I did, I would probably throw this thing against the wall. But I do use it for small pistol primers, which is, I don't know, for the money. Don't know that it was worth it, but I don't like pecking in small primers, so maybe it was, I don't know. You can be the judge after you watch the video and how many primers you peck, whether it's 100 or 600. That will obviously make a difference in terms of whether you're considering one of these primer tube fillers. If you only do a batch of 100 at a time, I would say these are definitely not worth it. But if you do larger quantities, then it might be something you're considering. And again, I don't know how the recording will come out, what will happen when I go to record it, but my experience so far has been I have not been able to get large primers to feed successfully in this thing, regardless of what angle I hold this. If I hold it down and level and turn it this way and that way, anyway, but upside down, which obviously nothing will feed. But I have not been able to get this thing to feed large primers. I've tried taking sandpaper to make sure that there's no burrs on the inside of this lip, and what invariably ends up happening, I don't know if I have anything that would adequately demonstrate we'll use this large cap, this large thing to demonstrate. But what ends up happening is, as the primer slides into this hole, the large primers start to tip down on the far side being the end here of the tube, starts to tip down like this, and as soon as they get sideways, they don't want to drop in. I've had them actually rotate all the way over so that they are upside down, in which case, obviously you have to get that out of there so it doesn't load upside down into your press. Small primers, they just drop right in. Large primers, I have not been able to get them to feed in more than 3 or 4 at a time without having to take it apart, get the primer out of there, possibly even empty a couple primers out to make sure that one didn't flip over entirely inside the tube. It's just been a nightmare, and totally frustrating experience so far, and I have given it every opportunity because I really wanted it to work. And like I said, I've sanded in here to try to make sure that there's no burrs, nothing that it should be getting caught on. I've tried different brands of primers. Maybe CCIs with a little bit more rounded cup work better than S&D primers, but trust me, it didn't work well with CCIs either. On the large primers. On the small primers, both S&B, Remington, CCI all worked really well on the small primer side. So with that, I'll let you watch me fumble through it, and you can be the judge for how well it works. And if you have any experience with this primer tube filler, any tips you might be able to share to get the large primers to feed, I would love to hear them. But here we go with the actual experience. Alright, so now I will do some small pistol primer. First I will time loading it by hand, not including flipping them over. I'm not going to include flipping them over because in this particular case there are none to flip over. But depending on the manufacturer and how the package, you could end up with kind of any old arrangement of primer alignment. So we'll start timing now. One thing I will say is that for whatever reason, my fingers cramp up a lot more when doing small primers than when doing large primers. They just seems to take just a tiny bit more effort to get them in there. And when I say cramp up, I'm talking after pecking away at 600 of these in a session. Obviously doing one batch is not that bad, and to a lesser degree it depends on primer manufacturer, because CCIs seem to be more rounded on the corners, for example, than S&B primers, and maybe Remington primers that I've used. Alright, so 59 seconds for 100 small primers, but like I said, missed one. I'll still give it 59 seconds. But like I said, it does take a tiny bit more pecking effort than doing large primers for whatever reason. Maybe it's the clip on my on the end of my primer tube, but I don't particularly like doing small primers. Large primers don't really bother me at all. Alright, so now I'm going to do small pistol primers with the Vibra Prime. I'm going to time that. As usual, I am not going to include the time to flip the primers over, as you never know what you're going to get in terms of primer alignment, upside down or up straight or what have you. But I will include the time that it takes to plug the various components together. So here we go, 100 small pistol primers CCI, and we will start the timer now. Reset the timer first and start. Alright, so 25 seconds to load the tube, so roughly half the time that it takes to load by manually pecking. And what you saw there has been my experience with the Vibra Prime and small pistol primers. They go in flawlessly, they just drop right in. I have no issues, no problems. I haven't had to polish the tray in any way or make any other modifications. They just feed right in there. So for small pistol primers, I love this thing. Okay, I'm going to record the time that it takes for me to load the primer tube with large primers. In this case, I have some S&B large pistol primers. I'm doing this by hand. I'm not going to record and count the amount of time that it takes to flip the primers over, since obviously that will vary based on how many primers are facing which way in any given case. So it wouldn't be a fair test or comparison. And timer here, and we will hit start. Now I'm not going to be trying to make a race of this, so this is just going to be kind of my average speed. Alright, so that came in at about 57 seconds, so about a minute to do 100 primers. These are large primers. Alright, so now we are going to time using the Vibra Prime tube filler. As far as flipping them over is concerned, I found the ridges work well enough. You know, I don't think it works quite as well as on my generic primer flipper tray, but it works well enough. Alright, so they are all flipped and oriented. Get this lid on here. Now, for timing, I'm going to include essentially plugging it in and twisting the primer tube onto the primer, because that's part of the process. And I will say that regardless of how this goes, I have yet to have a successful run, and believe me, I have tried. I have yet to have had a successful run with large primers and get them all to feed in without it just being a frustrating mess. So maybe this will be the first time. I don't know. I have tried to do a little sanding in there, make sure there are no burrs, but anyway, here goes. And we will start. And it's already jamming up. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take it apart. See that primer turned sideways the next time that happens, and I assure you it will. Get a little bit better close-up of what's going on. Now, I've tried every possible angle to get this to work. I'm going to try a different angle here. Doesn't want to drop in. Sometimes that works. Free them up. One kind of gets stuck in there. Yeah, I actually have no faith. Okay, so here we can see what's typically happening. Take this out. You can see that primer. See if we can see this on the camera. So the light's not very good where the camera is, but this primer here is starting to kind of tip over and turn sideways, and once it does, maybe if I zoom in here with it under the light, once that primer starts to tip over like that, it just does not want to fall down into the hole. So I also end up with no confidence that they're actually going straight into the primer tube, that they haven't flipped over in the tube itself. So I don't know, we're 3 minutes in, and I don't think we're halfway through this tray. That one's flipped over again. Just drop it down. Again, this is with large primers. Starting to turn. No, that one's not going to work. Try this angle. Nope, flipping over. So at this point, I don't know if I'm even going to bother getting the last 20 in here. We're at 4 minutes. Totally stuck. But, you know, we'll finish it up, I guess. Yeah, of course, taking the tray off. Some of them flipped over. And we're at 5 minutes. Yeah, I got one in without it getting jammed. Alright, I think I've had about enough. This has been my experience so far with large primers and the Vibra Prime. It is faster to put them in by hand. I assure you that I could pick these up and put them in by hand like this faster than they will drop in. I've even tried using this without the cover so I could help guide it in. That didn't work. Try it again. Level. Got one. And got 3 in. Is that a new record for today's video? And look at that, they almost started to work. Almost found a magic angle. Let me stop it. And it's clogged. So we got 4 here left. Do the primer a favor, do it by hand. So 7 minutes 25 seconds. I'll take 20 seconds off where I maybe held the primer up to the Vibra Prime up to the camera. So 7 minutes, large pistol primer with the Vibra Prime time-saving device.